Two officers dragged a quiet black man into court, laughed at his name, and mocked his silence, until he placed an FBI badge on the bench and turned the entire courtroom upside down. The bailiff barely glanced up when he called the name. Leonard Briggs. A quiet murmur spread through the courtroom, but no one moved, until a tall, clean-shaven black man in a wrinkled gray suit stood from the last bench and made his way down the center aisle. He walked without urgency, calm, deliberate steps. No lawyer, no briefcase, no entourage. Just him. Two uniformed officers in the back leaned toward each other. That him? One whispered. Gotta be. Look at him. Probably one of those fake sovereign citizens. Gonna tell the judge the laws don't apply to him. The other stifled a laugh. You know how many times I've heard that garbage? They chuckled loud enough to turn a few heads. Leonard didn't flinch. His face remained still. Too still, almost unreadable. Like he'd seen this exact moment before. The judge, an older white man with a thinning comb-over and a voice that sounded like it belonged on a local radio station, adjusted his glasses and looked down at the file in front of him. Mr. Briggs, he said, flipping a page. You're being charged with failure to comply during a lawful stop, is that correct? Leonard responded. That's what the report says. And you have no counsel present today? I don't need one. More chuckles from the back. The judge shot a glance toward the officers, but didn't say a word. The courtroom had just the right amount of tension. Not enough to break the rhythm, but enough to make everyone aware of it. All right, the judge continued. This appears to be a minor violation. We'll keep this brief. Mr. Briggs, is there anything you'd like to say before we proceed? Leonard took a step forward. Slowly, he reached into his coat. One of the officers in the back stood up slightly, hand twitching toward his holster. Leonard paused. Then he pulled out a slim laminated badge and placed it gently on the edge of the judge's bench. I'm Leonard D. Briggs, he said, his tone steady, unraised. Director of Internal Affairs, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The room went dead quiet. The judge didn't even blink at first. He just stared at the badge. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again. The officer who had half risen from his seat sat back down, jaw slack. His partner stared at Leonard like he'd just watched someone walk through a wall. You're with the FBI? The judge finally said. Leonard didn't move. Internal Affairs. I oversee misconduct investigations across the southeastern region, including local departments that turn off body cams during traffic stops. You could hear the shuffle of papers, a cough, a pin drop. Then the judge cleared his throat and leaned back slowly in his chair. Would you mind stepping to my chambers for a moment, Mr. Briggs? Leonard shook his head. I prefer everything. Stay on the record. Full transparency. One of the officers stood. We didn't know who he was, he mumbled, his voice barely audible. Leonard turned toward them, not aggressively, just looking, studying. You didn't ask, he replied. But that silence didn't last long because behind closed doors and open mouths, word travels fast. And this time, it was headed straight for the top. It was just after 10:30 p.m. when Leonard pulled off Highway 45 near Biloxi, Mississippi. He'd been on the road all day, visiting small departments across the Gulf region. Departments flagged for irregular reports, inconsistent use of force logs, and, most recently, suspiciously frequent malfunctioning body cams. His rental was a silver Toyota Camry, basic, inconspicuous, nothing flashy. He'd chosen it for a reason. Leonard didn't advertise who he was. He preferred quiet observation. That night, he was on his way to a small motel on Bayou View Drive when red and blue lights lit up behind him. He sighed, slowed down, and pulled to the shoulder. In the rear view, two officers stepped out. Both white, mid-30s, one with a shaved head and a flashlight already in hand. They didn't approach slowly. The bald one knocked hard on the driver's side window without waiting. License and registration. Leonard rolled the window halfway. What's the reason for the stop, officer? License. Registration, the cop repeated, sharper this time. You didn't use your blinker at that last lane change. Leonard glanced at the dash cam in the mirror. I'm pretty sure I did. You got something to hide? The second officer chimed in, appearing on the passenger side. No, Leonard replied calmly, but I'd like to know if this is a traffic stop or an interrogation. That didn't sit well. The bald officer leaned in. You giving me attitude? Step out of the vehicle. I haven't refused anything. I asked a question. Step out, now! Leonard didn't budge. He handed over his license. Leonard Briggs. No FBI mention. Just the ID of a man from Montgomery, Alabama. Clean, clear. Still, they weren't satisfied. Where are you headed? The officer asked. Can't say. You can't, or you won't. Leonard looked him in the eye. Federal protocol. That was it. That single phrase triggered something in the cop. What the hell is that supposed to mean? He snapped. You think you're above the law? Leonard didn't answer. The second officer opened the passenger door. Get out of the car, now. Leonard kept his voice low. This stop isn't lawful anymore, but they didn't care. Both officers pulled him from the vehicle. Hard. He didn't resist, but that didn't stop them from twisting his arm and forcing him to the ground. Knees in his back. One officer cursed loudly while the other called it in, as refusal to comply. Leonard didn't shout. He didn't plead. He stared straight ahead at the gravel under his cheek, memorizing every word they said. What neither officer realized was that Leonard had turned on a small audio recorder in his coat pocket the moment the lights flashed. It was habit. The kind that came from knowing how these things often go for men who look like him, especially in the South. By the time they hauled him into the local station, they'd filled out a hasty report, claiming he became verbally aggressive and refused to identify his destination. No mention of their own questions. No note of the unnecessary force, no camera footage either. When Leonard asked for the arresting officer's badge number, the response was a cold stare, followed by a snide remark. Don't worry, you'll have plenty of time to ask questions in court. He was placed in a holding cell overnight. No phone call, no chance to speak to a supervisor. Just an echoing corridor, flickering light, and the smirk of the officer who thought he had the final word. But that wasn't the final word, not even close. Because the courtroom they'd drag him into wasn't just a place to press charges. It was where the real trial would begin. For them. The silence in the courtroom didn't just linger. It thickened. After Leonard set his FBI credentials on the judge's bench, no one moved. The smirks from the back row were gone. The officer with the shaved head sat stiff, eyes darting between Leonard and the badge like he'd seen a ghost. The judge cleared his throat, but his voice wasn't as steady as before. Mr. Briggs, you're claiming to be with the FBI? Leonard didn't blink. Not claiming. I am. He gestured toward the ID again. You can verify the badge number with Director Travis McCall's office, or the Office of Inspector General in D.C. One of the clerks, a woman named Darlene, with 30 years on the job and a sharp instinct for courtroom drama, stood up slowly. Your Honor, would you like me to place that call? Please, the judge replied almost too quickly. Leonard stepped back, giving them room. The entire courtroom was frozen in place, watching. Even a toddler in the gallery had stopped squirming. No one was sure what would happen next. One of the officers, the one who had yanked Leonard out of the car, whispered, No way. This guy's playing us. The other leaned closer. That badge looks real. That ID looked real. This might be real. Then we're screwed. Leonard heard every word. He didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the judge, who now seemed a bit smaller behind that big bench. The clerk returned 5 minutes later, holding a small notepad and chewing the inside of her cheek. Confirmed, she said, not even glancing at the officers. He's FBI, Internal Affairs, Southeastern Division, been with them 27 years, rank checks out. The room, again, went still. But this time it wasn't silence from mockery. It was embarrassment. From the judge's shifting eyes, from the officer's shallow breathing, from the prosecutor who suddenly had nothing to say. Leonard finally spoke. I didn't come here to cause a scene, he said calmly. I didn't even come here to file a complaint. I was on assignment, off record, traveling through departments under current review. I didn't volunteer my ID because I wasn't obligated to. I gave my license, remained calm, and followed the law. His voice didn't rise, but it filled the room. I was assaulted, thrown to the ground, detained for hours without cause. My rights were ignored, but I documented every word, and I know exactly what procedures were violated. The judge leaned back in his chair, hands folded tightly. Mr. Briggs, I'm not here for your apology, Leonard interrupted. I'm here to request that the charges be dropped immediately, and that both officers be placed on temporary administrative leave, effective immediately, pending federal inquiry. The prosecutor opened his mouth, but the judge raised his hand. Granted. Both officers looked stunned. You're suspending us? Just like that? The bald one said, nearly shouting. The judge didn't answer. Leonard turned to face them directly. This isn't about me, he said. This is about every person you've treated like they didn't matter. Every citizen who didn't have a badge to pull out. I do. And I still ended up face down in the dirt. One of them stepped forward. Look, we didn't know who you were, all right? If we'd known... Leonard raised his hand, stopping him. That's the problem. But Leonard wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Because the badge might have silenced the room, but the truth was still buried under paperwork, lies, and the body cam footage that, conveniently, didn't exist. The courtroom emptied in a hurry. The gallery scattered like they'd witnessed something radioactive. The two officers stood near the exit, stunned, faces pale and uncertain. Neither reached for their phones. Neither said a word. They just stood there, stuck in the realization that something irreversible had just happened. Outside, the humidity of a Mississippi morning clung to everything. Leonard didn't linger. He walked straight to his rental, sat in the driver's seat, and finally, let out a slow breath. He didn't enjoy moments like this. They weren't satisfying. They were heavy, because they meant someone failed, again. At the small department down the road, Sheriff Ricky Halburn sat behind his desk when the call came through. FBI? He said, holding the phone to his shoulder. That guy was FBI. His deputy, Tamara Wells, stood near the door, arms crossed, expression unreadable. She'd seen the arrest report. Something about it never sat right. Yes, sir, came the voice on the line. Leonard Briggs, Internal Affairs. Ricky rubbed his forehead. You're telling me two of my guys arrested a federal investigator and dragged him into court without even checking credentials? Yes, sir. He slammed the phone down and looked at Tamara. Why the hell didn't anyone tell me he was FBI? She raised an eyebrow. Maybe because he wasn't treated like one. Back at the courthouse, the judge held a quiet meeting behind closed doors. No recorders, no minutes. Just whispers, red faces, and an overwhelming concern about what might hit the press. Leonard, meanwhile, was already at the motel, sitting on the bed with his laptop open and a secure call line buzzing. The voice on the other end was calm but direct. You all right? I'm fine, Leonard replied. But they're not. What's the situation? He laid it out. The stop, the aggression, the body cams that never clicked on, the overnight holding. The voice on the other end sighed. This the first report from that department? No. We've had 3 others in the last 18 months. All complaints dropped. 1 plaintiff moved states. Then let's make this official. Start the inspection. Leonard nodded, even though the other man couldn't see it. You want me to keep it quiet? Not anymore. Later that day, Officer Curtis Dell, the one with the shaved head, tried to clean up the damage. He showed up at the station, trying to look casual, but everyone noticed the shift, the fake ease in his walk, the way he avoided Tamara's eyes. He knocked on the sheriff's door. You got a minute? Ricky didn't look up. You better make it short. Look, I didn't know who he was. If I had known... I don't care if he was a garbage man or a ghost, Curtis. He didn't raise his voice, didn't make a threat, didn't move an inch without giving you a chance, and you still brought him in like some thug off the street. Curtis stepped in. I panicked. He was vague, started talking about federal protocols. We've seen fake IDs before. Guys trying to play federal. Ricky stared at him. And when he handed over a real license, you just threw it out the window? Curtis didn't respond. Ricky leaned forward. Do you understand what happens if the DOJ sends a team down here? Curtis glanced at the floor. I screwed up. Tamara, who had walked in mid-conversation, crossed her arms. You didn't just screw up. You put all of us on the radar, and maybe that's where we should be. Curtis looked at her, stunned. You serious? I'm tired of reading reports that don't match the body cam files. I'm tired of watching people walk out of here more broken than when they came in. Ricky didn't say a word. He just sat there, jaw tight, phone in hand, thinking about how many things were about to come to light. But if they thought the worst was behind them, they hadn't seen the file Leonard had just opened on his laptop. A list of names, dates, and red flags that went back years. Leonard sat at the motel desk, fingers gliding across the keyboard, eyes focused, not blinking much. He wasn't working from emotion. He rarely did. Emotion clouds things. Instead, he was building a timeline. He already knew what came next. He'd seen it too many times. The scrambling, the excuses, the sudden technical failures. He clicked open the department's official portal and submitted a formal request for the body cam footage from the night of his arrest. Time-stamped, specific, professional. He didn't even have to wait an hour. An email came back. Terse, defensive. We regret to inform you that the body cam footage from the incident on May 14th is unavailable due to a technical malfunction. We are currently reviewing maintenance logs to determine the source of the failure. Leonard leaned back and let out a short breath through his nose. Not a sigh. Just confirmation of a pattern. Another red mark in a folder that was already growing thicker by the hour. He called the DOJ's regional evidence contact and requested a cross-check on the department's bodycam software. 10 minutes later, he had what he needed. They've had 6 outages in the last 10 months, the analyst said, reading from a log, always during stops involving Black or Latino drivers, never once during training drills or traffic violations with white motorists. Leonard didn't react, just typed. Down at the department, the tension was building. Officer Dell sat at his desk, staring at his screen like it might collapse under the weight of what he was thinking. Across from him, Tamara scrolled through archived reports, pulling up files that hadn't been touched in years. She clicked into one from December. A young man stopped 3 blocks from home, claimed he'd been roughed up, filed a complaint. The body cam? Malfunction. Then another. Same story, and another. Her eyes narrowed. They really thought no one would notice, she muttered. In the back of the department, the IT tech, a guy named Brian, who mostly kept to himself, got a quiet message through the internal chat system. Hey, check the camera logs from May 14th, Briggs case. Who accessed the files before they disappeared? Brian hesitated. He didn't like being involved in this kind of mess, but curiosity overruled discomfort. He typed a few lines, ran a trace, and saw the answer almost instantly. Dell. Not just once. Twice. 2 hours after the arrest and again the following morning. Deleted entry logs. Bypassed review flag. Brian stared at the screen for a long moment, then printed the log and slid it into an envelope. He didn't send it electronically. He walked it over to Tamara's desk himself. She opened it. Her jaw set. Thanks, she said quietly. Brian didn't reply. He turned and left without a word. By the time Leonard walked into the department the next morning, wearing the same suit and holding a small manila folder, the front desk officer looked like he'd seen a hurricane in human form. Agent Briggs, the man stammered. We weren't expecting you. I'm not here to cause problems, Leonard said. I'm here to confirm patterns. He walked straight back toward the operations wing without waiting for permission. People stepped out of his way. He knocked once on the sheriff's office door and stepped inside. Ricky looked up, clearly worn down. I assume you got our email? Leonard placed the folder on the desk. I also got access records. Ricky didn't touch it. Someone went into the system, Leonard said, and deleted the camera logs manually. After the arrest. Before the arraignment. You want to take a wild guess who? Ricky rubbed his eyes. We're looking into it. No, Leonard said, voice calm but solid. You're not. I am. He turned to leave, then paused. I suggest you have Officer Dell's badge and service weapon ready by the end of the day. Internal Affairs will be on site this week. Ricky didn't argue. He didn't even lift his head. But as Leonard stepped back into the hallway, he knew Dell wasn't the only one who'd left fingerprints behind. And the inspection wasn't just about that one night anymore. It was about everything they tried to bury. By Wednesday morning, 2 black SUVs pulled into the rear lot of the Jefferson County Police Department. No sirens, no drama. Just quiet, deliberate presence. Leonard stepped out first. He was joined by 2 agents from Washington, Grace Mendoza, a compliance strategist with eyes like steel, and Nathan Cole, a digital forensics expert who didn't speak unless absolutely necessary. They weren't there to make noise. They were there to turn over every stone. Inside, the atmosphere had shifted. Officers who once swaggered now watched silently from behind screens. Ricky Halburn had barely slept. The only people speaking in full sentences were Leonard and his team. Grace took over the records room, requesting disciplinary files, traffic stop data, personnel evaluations, and IA reports. Anything with a paper trail. Nathan disappeared into the server room with Brian, the IT technician, who handed him system access without a fight. Leonard sat with Tamara in a small office near the back. She had a laptop open, dozens of windows full of old reports. Her expression was tight, focused. "These all look the same," she said. "Pulled over, claims of aggression, body cams off, vague write-ups, no follow-ups." Leonard nodded slowly. "It's not about one bad decision. It's about culture. What gets ignored, what gets hidden, what everyone else learns to call normal." She turned her screen toward him. "Here, May of last year. Man stopped after work. Claims he was asked to exit the car for no reason. No ticket, no arrest. But the report says he was non-compliant." Leonard skimmed it. Same language, every time. Down the hall, Grace entered Ricky's office without knocking. "I need your department's training documentation on use of force, escalation protocol, and camera operation policy." Ricky looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. He pointed to a cabinet. "Everything's in there. Take what you need." Grace opened the drawers, scanned the materials, and sighed. "This is 4 years out of date." Ricky said nothing. Meanwhile, Nathan was moving fast. Files were being cloned, camera logs extracted, deleted videos reconstructed from backup systems the officers didn't even know existed. When he found 2 videos labeled incomplete, he flagged them immediately. One of them had audio. It was from a patrol car mic. Barely a minute long, but enough. "You got something?" Leonard asked when Nathan handed him the headphones. Leonard listened carefully. The clip was grainy but clear. "Where are you headed?" "Can't say." "You can't or you won't. Federal protocol. You think you're above the law." The thud of a door opening, the rush of movement, the scrape of gravel, a grunt. Leonard looked up. "This is enough." He walked straight to Ricky's office, where Grace was still flipping through folders. "We're issuing a compliance hold," Leonard said. "No officer from this department is to participate in field operations until the review is complete." Ricky leaned forward, voice low. "You're shutting us down?" "Temporarily," Leonard replied. "You'll keep your dispatch running. Emergencies only. But as of today, your department's under federal supervision." Ricky exhaled through his nose. "You know what this'll do to us?" Leonard didn't move. "You know what not doing it already did?" The door closed behind him as he walked out. Downstairs, officers avoided his gaze, even the ones who'd never met him before. Tamara met him at the base of the stairs. "I pulled the complaint logs," she said. "There's a pattern in the denials. Most of the reports were marked unfounded without a single interview." Leonard raised an eyebrow. "Who signed off?" She handed him the list. Curtis Dell's name appeared again. And again. He folded the paper, tucked it in his coat pocket, and turned toward the exit. "Good work," he told her. Tamara looked almost surprised. "You think it'll change anything?" Leonard paused at the door. "That depends. Do you?" But change didn't just depend on paperwork. It depended on what the town would do when everything came to light. And by the end of the week, they'd be forced to face it all. By Friday morning, the story had reached more than just the courthouse steps. Local news stations picked it up first. Small blurbs, mostly speculation. FBI official arrested in wrongful stop. Then came the video clip. Grainy, from the patrol car mic, but unmistakable. And finally, the voiceover, federal protocol. That phrase echoed across living rooms, barber shops, and church pews. It wasn't just a line anymore. It was a question. What really happened? At Oakland Cafe, a group of older men leaned over mugs of coffee, arguing in low tones. I'm telling you, they pulled that man for no reason. Thought he was just another guy they could boss around. Well, if he didn't show ID, he did. License was clean. And even if he hadn't, that's not how you treat someone. Doesn't matter who he is. Across town, in the small community center on Jefferson Avenue, a group of parents met unofficially after school. They were tired. Tired of warning their kids about what to say and how to act if they ever got stopped. Tired of explaining that respect didn't always keep you safe. By late afternoon, a town hall was called. Short notice. Packed room. People came in tense. Some angry, some confused, some just looking for answers. The mayor, an older white man named Harold Lanning, took the podium with trembling hands. We're aware of the investigation. We're cooperating with federal authorities, and we will make changes. A woman in the back stood up. Her name was Felicia Green, and her son had filed a complaint 2 years earlier that went nowhere. You gonna reopen all those old cases? She asked, voice firm. We're looking into that, Harold replied. No, she said. Don't look. Act. Applause broke out. Scattered but real. Leonard stood near the back, arms crossed. He wasn't there to speak. He wanted to listen. Tamara arrived halfway through and slid beside him. Didn't think this many people would show, she whispered. They always do, Leonard replied, when they stop being afraid of the silence. One by one, people took the mic. A teenage boy talked about being stopped walking home from football practice. A single mother described being pulled over twice in the same week. Asked if the car was hers. An elderly man told a story no one had heard before. How in 1989, he'd been pulled over, cuffed, and let go without a word, just because. None of these stories made the news before. But tonight, the room listened. Then, unexpectedly, Sheriff Ricky walked up to the mic. The crowd quieted instantly. He looked older than usual. Or maybe just exposed. I've been in law enforcement 31 years, he began. And I'd be lying if I said I hadn't failed some of you. He paused, looked over at Leonard. We didn't know who Mr. Briggs was, but that's not the problem. The problem is, we didn't care who any of you were. That's on me. A few murmurs, a few nods. We're going to reopen the dismissed complaints, he continued. We'll work with federal oversight, and anyone who's part of this pattern will be held accountable, including me. A woman near the front shouted, Talk is cheap! Ricky nodded. Then hold me to it. Leonard said nothing, but Tamara glanced at him. You believe him? I believe the room, Leonard replied. After the meeting, people lingered outside, talking in clusters. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. But something had broken open. And once it's open, it can't be ignored again. But accountability means nothing without consequence. And Leonard had one final meeting to make sure that part wasn't forgotten. Monday morning, Leonard walked up the front steps of City Hall with a file in one hand and a small coffee in the other. He was scheduled for a closed-door session with Mayor Lanning. But when he arrived, 2 more people were waiting inside. Tamara Wells, now officially reassigned as Department Liaison for Federal Oversight, and Grace Mendoza, seated beside her with a folder of her own. The mayor looked up as Leonard entered. Didn't expect this many visitors, he said with a half-forced smile. Leonard didn't return it. He opened the folder and placed it on the table. These are the preliminary findings, he said. 5 confirmed violations of departmental policy. 3 cases of falsified reporting. 2 body cam tampering incidents. And 1 active attempt to obstruct a federal investigation. Lanning's hands tensed slightly. Are you recommending prosecution? Leonard didn't answer immediately. He looked over at Grace, who gave a subtle nod. We're recommending a full personnel audit, Grace said. Effective immediately, and the removal of Officer Curtis Dell. Lanning took a breath. You're asking me to fire one of our most senior patrol officers. We're asking you to restore trust in a system that's been broken too long, Leonard said. Tamara leaned in. We're also asking you to make a choice. Protect a man who's buried complaints and doctored reports, or back the community that just demanded change. Lanning stared at the table. For once, there wasn't an easy out. No press statement would fix this. No quiet suspension would satisfy what had been said out loud, in public, on record. He finally nodded. "I'll issue the termination letter today." Leonard closed his folder and stood. "We'll be monitoring compliance. Any further tampering or delay gets escalated to the Bureau." The meeting ended quietly, but the weight of it lingered as Leonard stepped outside. He didn't go straight to his car. Instead, he took a walk through the nearby square. People were out. Some shopping, others just sitting on benches, pretending this was a normal day. At one corner, he spotted a small group of high school students. One of them, a boy in a blue hoodie, gave Leonard a small nod. Just a nod, but different from the kind he'd seen before. This one had recognition in it. Respect, not fear. Leonard returned the gesture and kept walking. Back at the department, Officer Dell was called into Ricky's office. No explanations, no debates, just a printed notice, signed by the mayor, marked effective immediately. Dell didn't yell, he didn't argue. He just stared at the paper, then at Ricky. "So that's it?" Ricky looked up. "You think it shouldn't be?" Dell's voice cracked. "I did what I thought was right. I didn't know—" "You didn't care," Ricky said. "That's the part that did you in." Dell left through the back door. No one saw him again that day. Tamara stood in the hallway, watching the department shift around her. Some faces were relieved. Others were bitter. But the change was happening. Quietly. Steadily. Leonard returned that evening to finalize one last part of the process. A meeting with the mayor, the sheriff, and 2 representatives from the DOJ to begin drafting new departmental protocols. Mandatory reviews, body cam audits, community reporting systems. No one clapped. No banners were hung, but the real work had finally started. Outside, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, Leonard made one last call. His voice was tired, but steady. "Send me the next location," he said. There was a pause on the other end. "Already?" "Yeah," Leonard replied. "Already." But before he packed up and drove off, he sat for just a minute, thinking not about the title on his badge, but about how easy it was for people to forget that respect has nothing to do with what you wear, or what you drive, or whether you have an entourage. It's about what you do when no one's watching, and who you choose to be when the world assumes the worst.
Sometimes, the lesson isn't in the noise. It's in the silence that follows. In the way a room changes when someone stops laughing. In the way a town pauses after years of pretending things are fine. Leonard didn't need to give a big speech. He wasn't interested in headlines. What mattered was what people did when they thought no one would ever call them out. Back at the motel, he sat on the edge of the bed, shoes still on, phone buzzing with follow-ups from DC. He muted the notifications. Not out of defiance, he just needed a second. A small moment to remind himself why this still mattered after so many years. Not because he wanted justice for himself. That wasn't what this was about. It was for the ones who didn't have a badge, for the kid who walked home from practice and didn't understand why he was asked to empty his backpack, for the mother who got pulled over at 9 p.m. and watched her toddler cry in the back seat while the officer searched her trunk without cause, for the elderly man who never told anyone that a pair of officers had pinned him to the hood of his car in 1989 for rolling through a stop sign. None of them got to say, "I work for the FBI." None of them had a recorder in their pocket. They just went home. Or didn't. What Leonard had done in that courtroom wasn't about proving he had power. It was about using it the right way. Quietly, precisely. Without rage, without ego, but with purpose. Respect doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't come from uniforms or titles. It comes from seeing someone's humanity before you judge their value. People laughed when Leonard walked into that courtroom because of how he looked, because of what they assumed. But that moment didn't define him. It defined them. And what followed wasn't just an investigation. It was a mirror. For the department. For the town. For the system. You don't fix broken things by pretending they work. You fix them by listening to the stories you've ignored, holding people accountable, and refusing to let another name disappear into a file marked unfounded. So if you've ever been underestimated, know this. Your silence isn't weakness. Your calm isn't surrender. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding the most weight. And if you're ever in a position to speak up for yourself or someone who can't, do it. The badge doesn't make the man. The action does. Leonard Briggs wasn't a hero. He didn't need to be. He just needed to do his job. Fully. Honestly. And maybe in a world where so many forget what that looks like, that's enough. If this story moved you, even just a little, don't let it stop at the screen. Share it. Talk about it. Ask questions. Hold your community to a higher standard. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Because stories like this one, they're not fiction. They're reminders. And we need more of them.